Hi, my name's John and I run Water Babies here in the West Midlands and South Staffordshire, and I am here today just to talk to you a little bit about taking your baby swimming, why it's a brilliant thing for you to do, what the benefits of it are, and some of the things to look out for when you're looking at trying to start. So for you guys, and because you haven't had your babies yet, I know that at the moment you're almost entirely focused on all the stuff you need to prepare, so your prams, your car seats, your cots and all that sort of stuff, which is absolutely understandable. Having had kids, that's basically how you get organised. Well, the one thing that really hit home when we had our children was after that first sort of 2 weeks of excitement where everybody is round and you're showing your baby off to them, all of a sudden everyone disappears back off to normal life. If your partner's just had 2 weeks of child allowance leave, they'll be back to work, and all of a sudden you're left with this little bundle and you go, geez, what the hell do I do with this now? So it's really, really important just to start thinking about what sort of bits and pieces you can do with your baby to get yourself out of the house, to meet other new parents. Postnatal support is not brilliant anymore compared to what it was 10 years ago. So it's really important that you find things to go and do, get yourself social, and also get your baby into doing different things. So I'm talking to you today about baby swimming and why it's a good thing to do. Some of the things to look out for. Basically, baby swimming is a really fun thing to do. It's incredibly good for your baby's development, both physically and mentally, and I'm going to talk quite a bit about that. It's also really good from a water safety point of view, and we'll come on to that as well. But first and foremost, it's one of the very few things that you can do with your baby when they're absolutely tiny that they can get a lot of benefit from. So we have plenty of babies that start with us literally just a few days to a few weeks old. Your baby spends the first 9 months of their life in warm water. So that's how they develop, it's how their joints develop, how their muscles develop. As soon as they're born and have got gravity to deal with, then all of a sudden they can't move around very much. So you go from sort of having the ability to move whilst you're supported by the water to not. If you put babies back into water, the water helps support them and they can move around in the same way they can't on dry land. And what that means is your baby can actually start to exercise, literally right from birth. So when you put them in the water, they move all 4 quarters of their body, so their arms and their legs get a workout. It's really good from a cardiovascular point of view. We reckon that half an hour swimming lesson for a baby is somewhere in the region of an hour and a half in the gym for an adult. So it's a really good workout for them. So literally whole body, it's really, really beneficial. And if you look at some of the benefits, and again, I've got leaflets on the benefits if you want to take those away. From a physical point of view, there's loads, and what happens is everything that you do with your baby when they're little has a knock-on impact to how quickly they develop. So whilst you take them when they're tiny, you can see noticeable differences in their physical development as well as their mental development as well, but physical development as they get older. So when studies have been done that have sort of measured things at 2 and 5, there's a definite difference between babies that swim and don't swim. What's also really good about it is there is evidence that shows that children that get into healthy routines before the age of 2 are 5 times more likely to carry those healthy routines on into older childhood and teenage years. And so it's almost like basically getting them into those habits initially are really, really important. Baby swimming is also really good from a mental development point of view as well, cognitive development. And whilst that's probably not as obvious as the physical stuff, everyone kind of knows swimming's good for you. But a lot of what you do with your baby within a swimming lesson really stimulates their brain. So literally from your first lesson, we do something called splishing and splashing, where we move your baby from side to side as they're bouncing around the pool. Similarly, we'll get them lying on their fronts, lying on their backs. All of those activities are stimulating your baby's balance system, and that system is incredibly important for the way that their brain's connected together. It's one of the reasons that you instinctively rock your baby, is to help strengthen the connections within their brain. And there are also loads of things we do, and so we get them as they're swimming around reaching out for toys and so on. That's incredibly good for their hand-eye coordination, for their gross and fine motor skill development. And also we will sort of then use those things to even strengthen those sort of brain connections even more. So if you get a right-handed baby who is very dominant on that side, when you put the toy they're reaching for on their left-hand side and they reach across the midline of their body, that's incredibly beneficial for the way that the 2 sides of their brain are hooked up. And basically everything you're doing with your baby that impacts on all of these systems is making their brain connect together better. It's kind of like having two cities only connected by country lanes when they're first born, and everything you do that impacts on the balance system and things like reaching across the midline builds the connections between them. It's almost like building motorways between the cities, and it just means that information travels from one side to the other more quickly. And again, if you look at some of the details on our leaflets, you can go and look on our Instagram. The differences between babies that swim and don't are quite remarkable for something that you would never particularly think impacted on their brain. And you're talking up to potentially up to 2 years ahead in certain things when they're measured at the age of sort of 5, 6. And so it's all really, really interesting. It's also really good for a whole host of other things. So eating patterns, sleeping patterns, which in its own right is a good enough reason to take them. My daughter started at 4 weeks and she slept for 7 hours after her first lesson. We were like, yeah, this is brilliant. Well, she can't guarantee that every time. Most people find that their baby has a really good sleep after their swimming lesson, partly because they get really tired. But what that does is that then also almost makes them able to do that on a more regular basis. Similarly, it's really good for routines. As I said, hand-eye coordination, motor control, all that sort of thing. So it's really, really beneficial for your baby's sort of whole development. It's also really good for them in terms of water safety. Now, we don't particularly set out to say that we are water safety training. Those lessons do exist. They're quite prevalent in America, but the way that you introduce those sort of survival skills is quite brutal. But weaved into everything we do are a set of skills that will basically help your baby become really safe around water. We're aiming to get our swimmers pretty safe by the time they're around about 2.5. And we can do that literally right from the off. So one of the biggest factors in terms of babies and children drowning is that the shock of the water hitting their front. So even before the really tiny babies can do anything about actually getting themselves back out of the water, we can get them used to what that feels like. So we use a lot of words with our lessons. Your babies are able to understand words and associate them with actions incredibly early. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec with one of the sort of fundamental bits that we do. But in terms of getting your baby starting to get your baby safe around water, we do something called their name, are you ready, go. And what we do is we sit them up on the side, we say their name, we say are you ready, and then we say splash. And as we say splash, we bring them into the water onto their front. So they get used to what that sensation is like. That way, even if they can't do much about getting themselves back out again, they don't panic. You're more likely to notice them. The stats on the number of children who drown within 10 metres of an adult are staggering. That's far and away the most common. And drowning is on the increase in this country. We've had a increase over the last 3 years where drownings have doubled in children. So it's something that you really need to, it's a really good thing to get them done. The most famous one we had back probably pushing 20 years ago now, little girl up in Liverpool where we actually took our daughter and she was playing hide and seek with her mum, went off and disappeared. So my mum couldn't find her and then realised that they'd left the door to their swimming pool open. And this child at 2 had wandered in, fallen in fully clothed, and then swam herself back up to the side and was holding on and basically calling for her mum to come and find her. So to be able to do that for a child at 2 is absolutely amazing. We've had loads of stories of people whose babies have fallen into swimming pools on holiday, fallen into canals and brought themselves back up. And so it's, from a water safety point of view, it's really, really important. Obviously, if you're going to go and take your baby swimming, there's a couple of ways that you can do it. You don't have to go to lessons. You can take them yourself. If you are going to go to lessons, it's worth doing a little bit of research. The baby swimming industry, in particular, swimming as a whole, isn't particularly well regulated. So you can go away, do a couple of days worth of course, set yourself up as a swim school, and no one's really going to come and check what you're doing. So it's worth doing a little bit of due diligence on who you want to swim with. So you should always be being taught by a qualified swimming instructor. Ideally, they should have a full level 2 or level 3 qualification, not just a baby and preschool one. You should also look for making sure they've got the proper insurances and stuff like that. And basically, as long as you find a really quality baby swim school, you're going to have a really good experience. There is quite a big difference between going and doing proper baby swimming classes and the sort of parent and baby splash sessions that you might get at your local leisure centre. There's a big difference in price as well. But rather than what we do, rather than just having our sessions as being a bit of a splash, a bit of a nursery rhyme, that sort of thing, we are actually teaching them the fundamentals of swimming. So we're teaching them, we're working with the reflexes they have to help them kick their legs. So if your baby has a reflex from birth, where they'll move their legs, if you say kick, kick, kick to them, they will start to associate that activity with that word. And you get to a point where you can flip that round and you can say it and they will actively do the action. The other thing that massively separates out proper baby swimming lessons from your sort of leisure centre splash sessions is, and we'll teach your baby to swim under the water. Now, the reason we do that goes back to what I was saying at the first part of this talk in terms of how they develop in water. Children can't swim on the surface until they're typically around 4, maybe 3 if they start swimming when they're babies. And that's purely down to the strength of their core muscles and those in their neck to actually be able to lift their head up out of the water. What they can do is literally right from birth swim short distances under the water. So that's the reason that we do it. So your baby has a reflex called the gag reflex. It's basically similar to the thing that makes you gag if something hits the back of your throat, but it's a little bit different in babies. And what happens if any water gets too far, bits of their airway shut off so they can't take any water into their lungs. So what you can do is babies can go underwater, literally from birth. What we do though is we don't rely on that reflex. We start to teach your baby how to control their breathing themselves. So we use something called their name, Are You Ready, Go. So again, as I said before, babies can associate words with actions really well. My daughter at 4 weeks, when she started, as I said, and by her 6th lesson, we said those words to her and she closed her eyes. So he was a 10-week-old baby that knew what you were saying to her and knew what to do. So which just kind of blew our minds, really. It's part of the reason we started doing water babies in the first place. But if you use those words, what you'll quickly do is you'll basically get to the point where your child knows what's coming and they actually will prep themselves. They don't rely on that reflex. They will just hold their breath. And they can also tell you if they don't want to go under. And this is really important for wherever you look at taking your baby swimming. It is incredibly important that your baby only ever goes under the water when they're happy. So there used to be, if you've ever looked into this before, there used to be things where you might blow on their face, whatever, to trigger a reflex to get them to hold their breath and so on. And the most important thing about what we do is we will only ever swim a child underwater if we know that they're happy to go under. So if you say your name, Are You Ready, Go, and that child tenses up or cries or reaches around to grab hold of you, we know they don't want to go under and we leave them on the surface. And that is what makes us end up with really happy, water confident children, because they know they're in control of when they do and they don't. And there will be points where they don't want to for a variety of reasons. If they're teething, it can hurt through their ears. They can understand that all of a sudden if they do a thing, they control what you do. Babies are quite clever and it's all part of their development. Basically, as long as you listen to them, respect what they want to do, you end up with a child who's incredibly happy around the water and incredibly confident. And even when they do go through spells of not wanting to, they always come out the other end as well. Which is not to say that taking your baby swimming by yourself or to a local leisure centre is a bad thing at all. Whatever time they spend in the water is beneficial. If you are going to take them yourself, the things to look out for predominantly is the temperature of the water, and that is a little bit challenging when your baby's under 1. So babies under 12 months need to be in 30 degrees. Your average leisure centre runs about 29. Even ones with baby pools don't usually make 30. If your baby's under 12 weeks or under 12 pounds in weight, they need to be in 32 degrees, but you literally won't find that anywhere as a public place that you can swim. All of our pools are over 30. More of them are over 32 than not. So it's the sort of perfect environment. But as long as you are in that sort of ballpark, then you should be okay. If you're not sure, you can phone up a leisure centre and ask them what the temperature is. They will tell you. It's something they check several points in the day, and you're looking for it to be 30 once your baby's 12 weeks and 12 pounds. Even in a 30-degree pool, you're going to want to put them in a little baby wetsuit. Okay, so these are exactly the same as an adult wetsuit, so same material, and what they do is they trap a layer of water against the skin, body heats that water up, that stays there. It helps keep them warm. So that raises their temperature by a couple of degrees. It's the difference between a 6-month-old baby being in a pool for 10 minutes before they're cold to being in for half an hour. They'll get tired before they get cold. Which brings us on to our other pool wear related topic of nappies and poo. You guys who haven't had your baby yet, you are yet to discover quite how obsessed you will get with poo. Usually do this talk and it horrifies people, and then at once I saw someone sort of about 6 months later and I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe how right you were about the poo. Basically, it's really important that we don't get babies' poo into the pool when you take them. If you get the wrong kind of poo into a swimming pool, and that's basically all babies' poo is the wrong kind, then it's shutting that pool down for a reasonable length of time. So any of our lessons and any reputable baby swim school is going to insist on a pair of these, and usually over the top of a disposable swim nappy. It amazes me that leisure centres don't insist on this, but they don't. But for me to not be the person who has to go and tell a lifeguard that your baby's done a poo in the pool, they're well worth getting anyway. We recommend Splash About for all the pool wear related stuff. They make really good quality stuff. You can go out to various different places and buy something that looks a little bit like this. We don't allow them in our lessons because what they do to save money is they reduce the thread count of the elastic, so they don't do as good a job. So the difference between them is pretty minimal in terms of the cost as well. So go with Splash About stuff and you can't go wrong. Again, the wetsuits, we recommend Splash About ones. To be honest, there's less of a difference probably in terms of those. And then the only other thing we get asked quite a lot, a little bit less now in terms of the absolutes around immunisations, is what age your baby can start to swim. So your baby can start to swim from birth, okay? A lot of people think that they have to wait until they've had their immunisations. They don't. That guidance changed over 20 years ago. You will still find the occasional person within the health community that will tell you that they need to have had their jabs. But they're not immunised against anything that's waterborne. The reason they used to say you had to wait is because when they immunised against polio, they gave you a live vaccine and they were worried that might come out into the water. That is now not the case. So there is absolutely nothing to stop you starting. Our youngest ever baby, not here, but in the country, was only 24 hours old when they started. We had one at 3 days, I think, up in Burton. But basically, if you're sort of unsure about any of that, you can go onto the NHS website. If you just type in baby swimming immunisations into Google, it's the top result that comes up, and it basically says you don't need to have taken them for anything before they start swimming. It's no different to going to your local, stay and play session. So, and that's it, unless anyone's got any questions.